The curse of performance and the importance of measurement. I want to talk about probably the most important question you want to ask yourself as a hedge fund manager, and that is, what is my goal? And I want to give us here at Orange Capital Partners as an example of how we did it, not because we think that's the right way to do or whatever, but it's simply that's how we did it, and hopefully it helps other people. This is not investment advice. Please do your own work when it comes to investing. The purpose of this podcast is to give people a sense of what it feels like to run a hedge fund. And therefore, I think talking a little bit about our decision-making process hopefully helps other people. It's not even a podcast. It's December 10, 2025. This is Grindelco. For the year, we're up 18%. The market's up 17%. We're outperforming by 1%. So let's start with the most important question that anybody should ask themselves in the hedge fund business, by the way, not just in the hedge fund business, in any business. And that is, what is my goal? What is the purpose? So the purpose of Orange Capital Partners is to generate wealth by investing in fundamentally new concepts and engineering practices. That's our purpose. And that's very important. We want to generate wealth by investing in disruptive technologies. Now, there's roughly two ways for a hedge fund manager to pay themselves. In other words, to make a living and get paid. And one is to accumulate a lot of capital and then collect a small fee on top of that capital, maybe make a little bit of a return, but have a very large base. Because if you have a very large base, even a small percentage of that large base gets you paid. Or you have a smaller base or whatever base, but you're not optimizing for the base. What you're optimizing for is the return on that base. And that's where we stand. And when you invest in disruptive technologies, that is by nature what you're going to do, because disruptive technologies offer the opportunity to generate a lot of wealth based on a relatively small amount of equity. And that's what we do. Now, in parlance, that just means we want to optimize for very high returns. So that's important. Keep that in mind. So we made a decision when we started Orange Capital Partners in 2008. We're going to optimize for very high returns. Now, before I go further, let me just quickly elaborate why we made that decision. We didn't make that decision just because it feels good or it sounds good. We made it for three reasons. One, we don't think that when we started, me and my partner Zobinar, we weren't particularly skilled in raising money. We weren't connected with the Wall Street capital mafia, which is basically people that give each other money and help other people, raise funds and stuff. We had some connections, and that's how we were able to start. But we weren't particularly known in the business for managing large amounts of money. So we weren't very good at that. However, we were pretty good. We had a good track record in generating very high returns. So we naturally wanted to focus on that. Now, the third reason we did it, and that is maybe more of a philosophical reason, and it wasn't the explicit reason, but it certainly came with it, is it's the right thing to do. Because if you think about it, in the long run, if you generate high returns, you will please investors. And pleasing investors, like in any other business, if you can please your customers, which is our customers or our investors, then they will stay with you. They will pay you. You will have a good relationship. It's something that no matter how uncertain the future is going to be, you will always have a good situation in hand if you maximize returns. So that's why we chose to maximize returns. Now, given that we maximize high returns, the question then comes, how do we measure that? And this is where the title of this episode comes in, The Curse of Performance and the Importance of Measurement. It goes without saying that measurement is important. Measurement is important in any kind of endeavor where, whether it's a biological or an artificial intelligence is trying to optimize for something, you need to measure whether you're actually on the right path. So I think that's why measurement is important. And the curse of performance just means that in general, performance is a good measurement for anything. But it can also be a curse, because if you choose the wrong way to measure performance, you can actually get stuck in a suboptimal situation. So, for example, if we look at the performance of Tesla stock, which is our largest position over the last 5 years, it actually has underperformed, let's say, a company like JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs. And that's pretty embarrassing because you have to think about it this way. Like, what is the innovation that Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan are bringing to the table? Now, I don't know the details, but I would say in general, Wall Street banking hasn't shown any innovation whatsoever or anything worth talking about probably in the last 50 years. You know, there's some technology, there's some ideas, but overall, risk capital and the investment business in general hasn't changed much over the last 50 years. There's been some innovations, but very, very few. Compare that to a Tesla, which is like Elon Musk says, accumulation of startups that are solving deep tech problems. Now, how come they underperform? There's a couple of reasons for that, and we don't need to go into details. The main reason why Tesla underperformed JP Morgan Goldman Sachs is not necessarily because Tesla's done badly. Tesla's actually done okay. It's up about 120% over the last 5 years. But Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan done even much better. And the reason they've done much better is because of the Fed money printing, and they are the main brokers for the Fed money. They're kind of like toll roads. Think about it. If you print a lot of money, the money being the traffic, and the toll roads, the main toll roads that go from the Federal Reserve towards the economy, that's Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan. There's others, but those are the main ones. They collect a certain fee, and the more money, the more deficits, the more monetization of deficits, the more they make. Now, given within their sector, there's other banks that haven't done that well. So you have to give it to JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, that within their sector, they're certainly some of the best players. However, given compared to deep tech companies, I would call them at best a B minus player. So now that brings up the question, okay, why are you invested in Tesla if you can just buy a stock like JP Morgan? It's much easier, less controversy, less technology risk, less science risk, less anything. Why don't you just buy? And the answer is because we are in the business of generating wealth, and wealth in the end can only be generated by deep tech. It cannot be generated by inflationary spending, monetization of Fed money printing or any of that stuff. In the end, all of that stuff will, these are houses of cards. There's hot air. It will not work. But deep tech is the only thing which generates wealth. There's adjacent sectors that can make money with deep tech. You can buy real estate in Palo Alto or in Austin, Texas. You will probably make money because deep tech is situated there, and if they create wealth, then people will buy houses and stuff. So you can kind of make adjacent investment, but we chose to make the primary investment, which is we invest in the actual locomotive of wealth creation because we want to participate. So then the question comes, okay, you chose to invest in these deep tech companies, but over the last 5 years, Tesla hasn't done that well. Well, again, it's done okay. It's done underperformed relative to others, but over the last 20 years, Tesla has done phenomenally well. So then the question comes, okay, the problem, the curse of performance is the time frame. Well, which time frame are you going to use? If you use 5 years, Tesla doesn't look so good. If you use 7 years, it looks amazing. And the answer to that is you want to be very careful with the time frame, and you want to match the time frames that you're using for measuring your performance as a hedge fund manager with the time frame that you're giving yourself for the technologies that you're investing in. What I mean with that is the time it takes from a science idea to transition to a technology, to transition to a commercializable technology. Commercializable means that it can be scaled up at lower cost, and it delights a lot of people, and it offers those customers who buy that technology something that they can get at lower cost, at a higher convenience level, at a higher trust level, and more robustness and more comfort. Because those are the kinds of things people will always demand. They will always want more comfort, lower cost, more trust, more convenience. That's just how people Now, what does it mean to transition from science and technology to commercializable? Science is what science is, right? Science is whether you're looking for the next Higgs boson, developing the relativity theory, or whether you're developing a new lithium ion type battery or lithium phosphate battery or lithium iron battery, LFP, or whether you're building a transformer based AI, whether you're building AI data centers in space. A lot of these types of ideas start with science. That's why science is important. That's why we spend a lot of time within the scientific community to understand what are the trends in the science community that we think could transition to technology. Now, technology, what does it mean to transition from science to technology? It means that once you have a concept, for example, you have an idea that an AI data center in space could be a good idea. You do experiments in the lab and maybe even in space, and eventually you come up with a technology which is you build a product that actually develops compute in space. Now, what does it mean to transition from technology then to commercializable? It just means that that idea, that product that you just built, that prototype, can be scaled up at lower cost and higher convenience for consumers. A good example would be the Tesla cars, FSD, which was a science project maybe in 2014, and then turned into a technology in 2018, and now is becoming a commercializable wealth creating product because it can be scaled to millions and millions and millions of customers at lower cost, giving them higher convenience, higher comfort, higher trust, less accidents, more safety, better city planning. It's a win-win for everybody, and therefore we expect the FSD technology to now transition into commercializability. Now, what do we mean with time frame? Now, this is the gist of this episode. Is okay. The time frame you want to give yourself is you invest in a company. Let's take Tesla as an example, and you have a certain idea that they will commercialize FSD. This is part of the reason why you're investing in the company. You're also investing because of energy. You're investing because of AI and robotics. But the time frame that you're giving yourself for FSD, let's say started in 2018 with AI Day 1, which was around then that time, and you're giving yourself. We gave ourselves about 5 years for that technology to mature. It's now been 8 years since then, but we believe we're there now. FSD is ready. It's being pushed. It's being developed. It's being rolled out. So in the next 2 years, we expect Tesla to at least double from here, if not more. And that would put the company at a very, very good performance, probably outperform most other stocks that we care about. Now, doesn't mean it will be the best performing stock in the market, but it will do really well, definitely much better than a Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan, and definitely much better than the S&P. So this is the idea. And if within the next 2 years the stock doesn't double, because and that might happen because the FSD technology is actually not commercializing at the scale that we thought it should, well, then we have to go back to the drawing board and understand what went wrong. Now, the key of this episode is not necessarily to talk about the FSD. I just use this as an example. What I want to emphasize here is the measurement part. That's important. You need to measure your own ideas relative to what's going on in the real world. And the way you do that is primarily, of course, like in this example, you want to measure the actual commercial success of FSD. But if you want to be a little bit more abstract, you can just look at the stock performance. So in other words, now is the time when we expect the stock Tesla to actually do better. There's other reasons why the stock could do better. There's also reasons why it could do worse. So you have to be careful. Let's say FSD could be an extreme success, but there could be other issues and the stock maybe doesn't do that well. Then you might hang on to the stock. There's also the inverse, where the stock would do extremely well, but not because of FSD. Maybe it did well because of other reasons, and those reasons are not necessarily the kinds of reasons that you like them to be. I don't know, maybe Trump gave them some monopoly or something like that, whatever. And then you might want to even get out. But the point, again, is you want to match your trajectory, your time frame with the time frame that is that you're giving yourself for the technologies that you invest in. And of course, the more technologies the company has, like Tesla is an accumulation of technologies. There's FSD, there's electric car, there's battery, there's even lithium refining, there is chip manufacturing, there's robotics, humanoid robots, there's energy, there's energy deployment at scale, there's data center technology. Eventually, I think they should at least have a stake in X and also a stake at least a very close relationship with SpaceX. And if you combine all these things, you will see that there's a lot of potential also for Tesla technologies to transition from that science technology into commercialization. But the point again is you want to pick the ones that you think are going to be the driver. You want to compare your time frame with the actual time frame and the commercializability. And then if something doesn't add up, then you want to go recalibrate yourself. That's what's important because you need, as a hedge fund manager, to continuously recalibrate your ideas. You cannot be complacent. This is the gist. So again, the curse of performances performance on its own is worthless and can be a curse. But together with the necessity of measurement and the right way to measure, which is to give yourself a time frame and an arch from science to technology to commercialization, and that time frame needs to match with the performance that you're giving yourself and that you're using as a measurement. And then if things go well, then you're on the right path. And if things don't go so well, you have to recalibrate. You have to go back to the drawing board and maybe change your strategy.